Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Canadian jazz vocalist and composer Angela Verbrugge. She talked to us about her 2022 CD, Love for Connoisseurs. All 12 songs on this album feature original lyrics to either new or existing jazz compositions by modern-day composers. We cover this, COVID life, the future, and hope as we all move forward. It was great to catch up with a friend of the show. Enjoy this interview.
It's great to catch up with you again. And obviously the world's in a vastly different place from before.
Yes.
I think the one thing that's been our saving grace during this COVID time and everything that's gone down since March of 2020 has been music, and you obviously have a brand new album out. So I guess before we get into that, how have you been doing with living and surviving through COVID?
Well, I was, like everyone, just completely surprised that this actually happened, like this whole quarantine happened at all. Like, you know, it was just so, everyone kind of thought it was going to be like SARS or one of these other things that the media makes us think about, and then it kind of is a glitch on the map and goes away. So the fact that we actually went into lockdown, we were in Hawaii at the time that it happened. We had our very first vacation to Hawaii, and I was writing lyrics on the beach, and I was, you know, we were watching the news and we just couldn't believe we were, you know, Canadians come home. We had to flounder around and get flights back because it was right at the time that everything went into lockdown and nobody knew what was going to happen. So what I did, I started just between taking online courses, I found some really great, everyone started using Zoom, as you know, and jazz education went online. And teachers that were too busy, were touring, were teaching at universities that previously suddenly, you know, were offering really great courses. And so I was taking those, and then I just decided that in Canada we had access to apply for some recording funding, and they really give more credit to original projects and things that Canadians are doing to create new art rather than reproductionist kind of genres. They give a lot more weight to those applications. So I had some songs in the works, and then I just knuckled down and started really building this repertoire for the album so that I could apply, and I was successful in getting a little bit of funding support to record it, but then that came with deadlines, and so that forced me to really just knuckle down and make this project happen.
Wonderful. So what did you learn about yourself over this time of much more time at home and self-reflection that maybe you didn't realize before that's going to make you stronger as you get out and promote this album and play more live music?
Well, I guess that in some ways I'm stubborn, and I think I need to do everything myself. and then during the making of an album, you can't do everything yourself. You know, you have to trust and bring in accomplished and intelligent and experienced people to advise you. And so I think I learned to build a strong team. Like, I didn't want to write all the material for this myself. I went looking for some of the best composers that are living on the scene today for the melodies and compositions that became Love for Connoisseurs. I did write 3 of the songs myself, but the rest are collaborations with New York City and Vancouver talent, some of the best kind of bebop-oriented musicians today, Ray Gallen, Neil Miner, Ken Fowler, Nick Hampton, and in Vancouver, Miles Black, Saul Burson, you know, collaborating with them for the songs and the fact that they were trusting me to write lyrics for their babies. And then I worked with a wonderful up-and-coming vocalist named Katie George, who is based in Montreal right now. She's from Calgary. She lived in Toronto as well, but she is making waves as herself as a jazz vocalist, but she acted as a trusted co-producer and helped me to rehearse independently I was on my own. She's in Montreal, but to give me feedback, to give me ideas, to help me listen to mixes and mastering. And then Miles Black, who is an absolutely incredible multi-instrumentalist, jazz musician all his life, and, you know, deserves wider fame and fortune for sure. He's one of those people that doesn't really do a lot of self-promotion, but his work as an arranger, as a composer, as a musician. He played piano on my record, but he also is called to play guitar, bass, background vocals, other horns in professional settings in Vancouver every month. But to work with Miles and to sit either in person when it was permitted at his elbow and work on the arrangements or virtually. And I just learned, you know, he would ask me, I had instincts, and then how to notate them, or where, you know, we would talk about how to bring these songs to life in the best possible ways with the arrangements that came for recording as well as for performing.
So what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Well, I think that listeners have heard the Great American Songbook and related material a lot. Now, at the point that we're at, the giants of jazz, the dead divas, you know, have done such a marvelous job of recording and performing those songs. And for me, I came to those songs through songbooks at my piano. I didn't have jazz parents. I didn't have, you know, as much of that going on when at a younger age as some people who become jazz musicians. I came to love them just from the written page. I think that by flipping through endless songbooks as my hobby as a child, I internalized the rhyme structure, what most classic jazz standards and swing standards and traditional pop songs. So what I felt was missing was the evolution of that. When I looked for new material that people were writing today that was in that classic jazz standard style, and I came up fairly empty-handed. There are obviously exceptions. There are some great people that are working today, but it's pretty small. It's a pretty small number of people that are doing that. So, and I also noticed that these instrumentalists were writing great compositions, but they weren't performing each other's compositions as often. I would hear them perform their own compositions, but it didn't seem like there was any longer like a culture of musicians performing each other's works. I know that when I researched and read about the history of, you know, with Will Friedwald's books or the history of jazz and pop singing, that when the songs had lyrics added, they just became more likely to be adopted into like the public consciousnness. So I thought if I could add lyrics to some of these great compositions that I really dug the melody of these songs that I was hearing I had previously heard at Frankie's Jazz Club in Vancouver when Corey Weed was bringing a lot of New York acts through, so I had the chance to meet them and hear their music live, or when I was in New York recording my first album at Smalls, and I would hear these instrumental compositions that didn't yet have lyrics, and I just chose ones that I thought were suited to having lyrics and that had really strong melodies, and I hope that this can create, you know, new repertoire for today's jazz vocalists to sing, that it will also help make these compositions more enduring, perhaps for other instrumentalists to notice and pick them up. In the day, you saw the different saxophonists recording each other's compositions on recordings, and I didn't really notice that happening as much. Maybe once Mulgrew passed away, you know, then people started doing tributes and maybe performing some of his work, but I didn't see a lot of new material being added to the jazz repertoire.
Talk to me a little bit about, you know, the return to the stage. What do you hope we all collectively realize about the power of live music as we get back to it?
I was actually very, very fortunate with some timing. I have had a chance to go back to the stage. British Columbia did quite well during the early days of COVID, and we stayed open but socially distanced with plexiglass and whatnot on and off during the pandemic. And then I was fortunate to book some dates in Europe. I went to Pizza Express in London and some top jazz clubs in Istanbul to bring the music there, and did some guest appearances in Spain and Germany. And then this spring, I brought the music across Canada. We had a number of dates in British Columbia, my home province, and then we went to Alberta and Ontario. And I think the power of live music, I think there's something very visceral that happens with the melodies and the grooves and the feeling of the bass and the drums in your body that you just don't get listening on headphones. So there's something that happens to your whole body and spirit when you're in a live jazz club, and you're in our culture of ADD, of really being, we're trying to, my kids they're watching a movie, they're also playing a game on their phone, and maybe they're also got their homework beside them on the couch. It's like a lot of us are trying to multitask. And I think there's something about being really present to the music in a jazz setting, and the audience giving that, holding space and giving that energy to the performers is magical. Like, there's something that lifts up from what you can do practicing at home versus when you're in that kind of psychic relationship with both other musicians on stage and the audience. That's very, very special. And then just the storytelling. The songs that I've written tell of romance, or romance gone wrong, or conundrums of one kind or another, annoyances about cleaning, a bad boyfriend, a romance over the unlikely gift of corn on the cob at a summer picnic. I think just the storytelling that happens through music, whether it's my gig or I'm attending someone else's, whether it's instrumental or vocal, to consider how artists are interpreting music from their totally unique perspective. Every single person has a different perspective and has had different life experiences, and they bring that to their music and their stories.
Beautiful. Well said. Angela, thank you for taking time out to talk about the new album, this COVID life we're living, and good luck with everything as we move forward.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks so much for having me on Neon Jazz.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers and players in Canada, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Angela for her time, music, and energy. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Like you and me. Like you and me.
Neon Jazz.